Karen, move your damn Tesla. I've got work to do.
Those words started a brutal 3-week war. Every morning, smug HOA president Karen Whitmore parked her shiny white $90,000 Model S across my driveway like she owned it. From her kitchen window, she filmed my struggles, posted them in the neighborhood group with laughing emojis, turning my misery into her entertainment. I lost $8,400 in construction jobs, no way to get my equipment out. Couldn't even drive to buy groceries. I was trapped at home. Meanwhile, Karen sat in her fancy Tesla, sipping latte, waving with a smug grin like she'd won. Tomorrow it ends. Her luxury blockade meets my 40-ton logging truck convoy. No cops, just raw physics. 80,000 pounds crushing pure entitlement flat. The first crunch won't be metal. It'll be arrogance obliterated. Ready to see deal with it destroyed? Drop your country flag if you're team logging truck. Let's make this justice global. I'm Garrett Mills, and Karen Whitmore just declared war on the wrong damn guy. 3 years ago, I thought I'd found peace in Millbrook Heights, Oregon, lost my wife Sarah to cancer, inherited Grandpa's 5-acre spread, figured I'd work construction and keep to myself. Half my property's rural farmland, half borders this fancy subdivision that appeared like a rash after some developer decided our quiet county needed more California refugees. My side, rustic cabin, workshop, diesel F350, and a $200,000 excavator that pays my bills. Across the street, Karen's 4,800 square feet of white stucco entitlement sitting on a quarter-acre like a middle finger pointed at working folks. The morning used to smell like Douglas fir and honest sweat. Now it reeks of Tesla leather and pure malice. Karen Whitmore moved here 6 months ago with her California real estate license, instant HOA presidency, and the kind of predatory smile that says, "I'm about to ruin your life with bureaucracy." 48 years old, yoga pants like armor, Starbucks permanently grafted to her palm, drives that $90,000 Model S like she's delivering social justice to the unwashed peasantry. This woman runs a boutique real estate company specializing in upscale rural communities, which means she finds quiet places where working people live, then gentrify them into California-priced playgrounds for tech refugees. I'm not her first rodeo victim, just her biggest mistake. She started with passive-aggressive reconnaissance missions. Concerned neighbor visits about my unsightly commercial vehicle, allegedly damaging everyone's property values. Helpful suggestions that maybe I should relocate my industrial activities somewhere more appropriate. The diesel exhaust from my work truck apparently triggered her Tesla's delicate environmental sensitivities. I should have recognized the pattern when she began timing my movements with military precision. 6 a.m. departure for job sites. Karen's suddenly checking mailboxes. Noon lunch run. Karen's having spontaneous neighborhood chats directly across my driveway. Sunday grocery trips. Karen's Model S develops mysterious 30-minute parking needs right where I need to drive. The woman turned blocking my access into performance art, testing my patience like a cat torturing a mouse. But I'm patient by nature. 47 years of moving actual mountains teaches you not to waste energy on pebbles. Figured she'd get bored, find easier prey, maybe retreat to whatever California subdivision she'd already destroyed. Fatal miscalculation on my part. That Tuesday morning changed everything. The gravel under my work boots crunched like breaking bones as I stared at her Tesla positioned with surgical precision across my gate. Not angled, not accidental. A perfect automotive roadblock designed to trap me on my own goddamn property while she filmed from her kitchen window. "Deal with it, peasant," 4 words, delivered with a smirk that could cut glass, iPhone recording my reaction like I was her personal entertainment channel. Within 30 minutes, my humiliation was posted in the Millbrook Heights Community Standards Facebook group with crying, laughing emojis. When you have to educate the locals about neighborhood aesthetics. 63 likes, 47 comments, all mocking the dumb redneck who forgot his place in Karen's social hierarchy. The community fractured immediately. Karen's acolytes, mostly new money terrified their investment portfolios might suffer, rallied around her property improvement jihad. Meanwhile, locals who understood that work trucks actually work for a living saw through her bullshit faster than morning fog. Big Jim at Millbrook Hardware banned her on site. "California cancer," he growled, "spreads everywhere, kills everything decent." The Main Street Cafe developed an invisible Berlin Wall, Karen's supporters sipped oat milk lattes at the Tesla table discussing problematic elements, while real neighbors drank actual coffee at the pickup booth and planned Karen's education. Deputy Rodriguez attempted diplomatic intervention, but Karen smiled sweetly, nodded cooperatively, then filed 3 separate complaints with the county the next morning: noise violations, zoning infractions, unlicensed commercial operation endangering residential safety. Pure bullshit. All strategically calculated to drown me in legal fees until I surrendered. That's when I realized this wasn't about property values or neighborhood aesthetics. This was conquest. Karen had successfully destroyed working families before, and I was just her latest target practice. She picked the wrong target. Game on, princess. Week 2 of Karen's psychological warfare began with military-level organization. This woman didn't just wake up one morning and decide to terrorize me. She orchestrated this shit like D-Day with clipboards. Monday morning, 7 a.m. sharp, I walked out to the smell of fresh coffee mixing with Karen's expensive perfume carried on the morning breeze. 3 neighbors with clipboards stood positioned around my property like a goddamn survey team. Karen had organized her own safety patrol, documenting everything: my work truck's dimensions, equipment storage, noise levels, traffic patterns, taking photos, making notes, treating my livelihood like evidence of some federal crime. "Morning, Garrett," called out Janet Morrison from 2 houses down, iPhone raised like she was filming a nature documentary about dangerous wildlife. "Just conducting community safety assessments. Hope you don't mind." Mind? I minded that these people had nothing better to do than harass a working man trying to make an honest living. The gravel under their designer sneakers crunched with every step as they circled my property like vultures evaluating roadkill. Karen's first tactical error was assuming I was some dumb country boy who wouldn't fight back with proper paperwork. Within 48 hours, she'd filed formal complaints with Clackamas County about my unlicensed commercial operation, demanding immediate investigation and shutdown of all industrial activities on residential property. 7 pages, 7 goddamn pages of legal-sounding bullshit about zoning violations, environmental hazards, and threats to community safety. Karen had researched county codes like she was preparing for the bar exam, citing specific statutes and demanding immediate action. Sarah used to tell me that the most dangerous people were smart enough to sound official, but stupid enough to believe their own lies. Tuesday morning brought Joe Briggs, county inspector, to my property. 30-year veteran with calloused hands and the no-nonsense attitude of someone who'd seen every scam from people like Karen. I figured I was screwed. 7 pages of official accusations versus my word that everything was legal. Joe spent 20 minutes examining my setup, checking permits, reviewing my grandfather's original agricultural zoning documentation from 1987. I'd learned years ago from my contractor buddies that rural properties often have grandfathered agricultural exemptions protecting existing operations, knowledge that apparently escaped Karen's research. Then Joe started laughing. The sound mixed with distant chainsaw work from the lumber mill, creating a symphony of actual productivity versus Karen's manufactured drama. "Garrett, you've got the cleanest operation I've seen all year. Licensed, insured, grandfathered under agricultural protection since before that subdivision existed." He shook his head, sawdust and motor oil apparently reminding him of his own father's workshop. "Your neighbors complained is complete horseshit. Matter of fact, you wouldn't happen to do excavation work, got drainage issues at my place." Joe Briggs became my first official ally that morning. More importantly, Karen's carefully crafted 7-page accusation made her look like an amateur to county officials. All that legal research, all those official-sounding citations, worthless when confronted with actual facts and proper documentation. But Karen's humiliation only fueled her rage. That afternoon brought Phase 2, social media blitzkrieg. Millbrook Heights Community Standards Facebook group exploded with Karen's propaganda campaign. Photos of my equipment labeled industrial blight. Time-lapse videos of my morning routine branded as noise pollution documentation. And she'd recruited 5 neighbors to post manufactured concerns about property values, safety hazards, and the declining character of our community. The taste of injustice burned in my mouth like copper pennies as I watched neighbors I'd helped with emergency repairs suddenly post about how my presence threatened their investments. My response was surgical precision. I hired Marcus Thompson, surveyor buddy from the county office, to reestablish exact property lines with bright orange markers. Cost me $200, but it revealed something beautiful. Karen's Tesla had been parked 18 inches onto my property every morning. 2 weeks of daily criminal trespassing, documented and measurable. The metallic ping of Marcus's measuring tape against Tesla's bumper was the sweetest sound I'd heard all month, like a dinner bell announcing Karen's legal exposure. "Well, I'll be damned," Marcus muttered, double-checking measurements. "Your neighbor's been trespassing on your land this whole time. Daily violations, criminal charges possible." I started photographing every trespass with timestamps, building a legal fortress while Karen played Facebook games. Filed my own complaint with the county about repeated vehicle trespassing and property damage, turning her weapon against her. Karen's reaction was predictable but satisfying. Moved her Tesla exactly 6 inches from orange markers, posted about hostile neighbor using intimidation tactics, and organized a petition demanding emergency zoning changes to shut down my operation. Community pressure intensified like steam building in a pressure cooker. Big Jim at hardware store banned Karen entirely, telling her to take your entitled ass back to California where it belongs. Main Street Cafe became a literal battlefield. Tesla table, where Karen's supporters planned attacks, versus pickup truck booth, where my allies strategized defense. Anonymous support materialized. Coffee and donuts at my gate with notes saying, "Hang tough," and "Real neighbors support real work." Karen's overreach was backfiring spectacularly, converting neutral residents into active opponents of her authoritarian bullshit. By week's end, Karen escalated to professional stalking. She positioned her Tesla at varying angles throughout each day, claiming security concerns required monitoring my property for suspicious activity. Hours spent sitting in that car, engine running, air conditioning blasting, creating noise while photographing through my windows with telephoto lenses. The woman had turned harassment into her full-time career, and I was her only client. Week 4 brought Karen's masterpiece of psychological warfare, precision timing designed to strangle my livelihood one morning at a time. Every day at exactly 5:30 a.m., precisely when I needed to leave for job sites, Karen's Tesla materialized across my gate like a white metal executioner's block. Not 5:25, not 5:35, 5:30 on the fucking dot, forcing me to squeeze my F-350 through an 8-inch gap between her bumper and my fence post while she filmed from her kitchen window like David Attenborough documenting dangerous wildlife. The sound of scraping paint became my daily torture symphony, metal shrieking against metal as I navigated Karen's gauntlet. She'd post the footage online as reckless driving near occupied vehicle, adding captions about my dangerous disregard for neighborhood safety. The morning air reeked of her overpriced latte mixing with my diesel exhaust, creating an aromatic battlefield where privilege waged war against productivity. "Careful there, Garrett," she'd call out with saccharine sweetness, voice poisoned with fake concern. "Wouldn't want any accidents, would we?" The woman had weaponized punctuality, transforming my work schedule into her personal entertainment calendar while systematically destroying my truck's paint job one morning at a time. But Karen's obsessive documentation created an unexpected trap for herself. 3 weeks into her harassment campaign, I remembered something my contractor buddy Jake told me about insurance liability after his neighbor's tree accidentally fell on his equipment. Property owners who create hazards while claiming safety concerns often find themselves legally exposed when professionals examine their actions. Tuesday morning brought the call that changed everything. Mike Patterson from State Farm, voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Garrett, our legal department reviewed those videos your neighbor posted online. Their professional opinion? Her vehicle placement constitutes deliberate obstruction creating unsafe conditions with malicious intent. We're opening a liability claim against her insurance company for property damage, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." The metallic taste of victory replaced weeks of copper-bitter injustice burning in my throat. Karen's own evidence, her precious iPhone footage posted with laughing emojis, was now being dissected by insurance investigators who'd seen this exact scam in suburban neighborhoods from Seattle to San Diego. My countermove was calculated precision. $1,500 security upgrade with motion sensors, floodlights, and commercial-grade cameras covering every angle of my property. Turned Karen's surveillance theater into my evidence collection operation, then launched Millbrook Gate Chronicles, live streaming her morning harassment sessions to Facebook. The response exploded beyond my wildest expectations. Local viewers multiplied from dozens to hundreds to thousands within 72 hours. Comments poured in from across Oregon, then Washington, then nationwide as Karen's entitled behavior went viral among working Americans who recognized her archetype immediately. The California predator who moved somewhere affordable, then tried reshaping it into whatever progressive hellhole she'd fled. "This bitch needs education and small-town courtesy," posted someone from Burns. "Karen's about to learn why we don't mess with working folks." "Team Garrett all day," commented a viewer from Bend. "Hope that Tesla becomes expensive scrap metal." The community fractured completely. Hardware store, cafe, post office, gas station, everywhere became Karen versus Garrett battlegrounds. She'd recruited maybe 15 supporters, mostly newer residents terrified their $500,000 investments might depreciate if forced to coexist with actual working vehicles. My backing included 3 generations of locals who understood that honest labor built this county decades before real estate parasites discovered its affordability. Karen escalated with theatrical desperation, bringing folding chair, umbrella, laptop, and portable weather shelter to create a mobile office beside her Tesla. Claimed she was working from home while monitoring suspicious neighborhood activities. The woman literally established a harassment headquarters complete with coffee thermos, organic snacks, and phone charger, turning terrorism into her full-time career with benefits and catered lunches. Morning air grew thick with the competing scents of her expensive granola bars and my truck's honest exhaust, creating an olfactory monument to suburban class warfare. "Gorgeous morning, isn't it, Garrett?" she'd chirp from her command throne, designer sunglasses reflecting my mounting frustration. "Just appreciating our wonderful community." By day 28, Karen positioned her Tesla bumper exactly 6 inches from my gate latch, making access impossible without physically climbing over her vehicle. She'd accidentally trigger the car alarm whenever I approached, unleashing electronic shrieking that sent neighborhood dogs into howling frenzies at 5:30 a.m. sharp. A daily cacophony of suburban warfare that woke half the subdivision and turned neutral residents against her increasingly unhinged tactics. But Karen's theatrical harassment generated unintended consequences that would prove fatal to her campaign. My streaming audience had reached 2,400 regular viewers who began investigating her background with the thoroughness of amateur detectives. Comments revealed she'd executed identical harassment campaigns in 2 previous counties, systematically targeting working-class property owners adjacent to developments her real estate company represented. A pattern emerged: harassment, forced sales, convenient listings that followed her trail of destruction across Oregon like a plague of gentrification. The woman wasn't just evil, she was professionally, systematically evil, and now thousands of witnesses were documenting every move for posterity. 3 weeks of warfare had transformed Karen from neighborhood nuisance into full-blown suburban dictator, and week 5 brought her nuclear option, weaponizing the legal system with lies so brazen they belonged in a criminal mastermind's playbook. Monday morning arrived with the metallic bite of October frost and the bitter taste of Karen's most desperate gambit, a formal restraining order petition filed with Clackamas County Circuit Court. 8 pages of carefully crafted fiction claiming I'd made aggressive threats, engaged in cyber-stalking via illegal surveillance, and created a pattern of intimidation designed to force her from her lawful residence. According to Karen's sworn testimony, I was apparently some combination of terrorist and stalker. She claimed I'd threatened to destroy her property with heavy machinery, made menacing gestures while operating dangerous equipment, and that my security cameras constituted illegal surveillance of her private activities. My live streaming was cyber-stalking with malicious intent to cause severe emotional distress and reputational damage. But the piece de resistance was her witness list, 5 neighbors providing detailed corroboration of my alleged threats and aggressive behavior. Mrs. Patterson from 1247 Elm Street swore I'd revved my truck engine menacingly while staring at Karen's house. Mr. Palmer from 1251 Elm described my threatening body language and hostile demeanor. 3 others provided sworn statements about my escalating pattern of dangerous harassment. The problem? I knew Millbrook Heights like my grandfather's calloused hands knew his tools. Mrs. Patterson lived at 1247 Pine Street, not Elm, and had been visiting her daughter in Phoenix for 2 months. Mr. Palmer lived at 1251 Oak Drive, was 78 years old with a walker, and hadn't left his house since hip surgery. The other 3 addresses didn't exist in our zip code, our county, or possibly our goddamn dimension. Karen had committed perjury with the enthusiasm of someone who thought laws were suggestions for lesser people. Years ago, my contractor buddy Mike warned me that desperate people often made fatal mistakes when they assumed everyone else was as stupid as they were careless. Karen just proved his theory with federal felony charges. The morning air reeked of her desperation mixed with coffee grounds and panic sweat as I realized I was dealing with someone willing to fabricate reality itself to destroy me. The woman had crossed from harassment into criminal conspiracy, and she documented every lie with her own signature. Tuesday brought salvation in the form of Sarah Palmer, my late wife's college roommate, now a civil rights attorney who specialized in harassment cases. She'd been monitoring Karen's behavior through my live streams, and her reaction to the restraining order petition was immediate and volcanic. "Holy shit, Garrett," Sarah's voice crackled with professional bloodlust over the phone. "This psychopath just handed us a federal case wrapped with a bow and signed confession attached. She didn't just lie to the court. She manufactured fictional witnesses with impossible addresses while swearing to their truthfulness. That's not perjury, that's conspiracy to commit fraud against the judicial system with civil rights violations as garnish." The sound of Sarah's fingers flying across her keyboard was like machine gun fire as she prepared legal ammunition that would turn Karen's lies into her own execution warrant. Within 4 hours, Karen's expensive Portland law firm withdrew representation with a formal statement citing irreconcilable differences regarding client truthfulness. Legal language translating to, "Our client is an unhinged criminal who's going to get us all disbarred if we don't run like hell." Sarah's counter-motion was surgical precision delivered with nuclear warhead impact. Documented proof that Karen's witnesses were fictional, supported by county records, property assessments, postal service verification, and testimony from neighbors who actually existed in consensus reality. Federal civil rights charges followed, citing systematic harassment, abuse of legal process, and conspiracy to deny constitutional property rights through fraudulent court proceedings. The community response was immediate and devastating. News of Karen's perjury spread through Millbrook Heights faster than gossip at a church potluck. The HOA president, their elected leader, had lied to federal courts, fabricated witnesses, and committed multiple felonies while claiming to protect neighborhood integrity. Even her most devoted supporters began evacuating her sinking ship like rats fleeing a flood. The morning air grew thick with whispered conversations and the sound of former allies deleting supportive Facebook posts before association with perjury Karen could contaminate their own reputations. But legal humiliation only transformed Karen from calculating predator into unhinged terrorist. Facing federal charges, she abandoned all pretense of civilized behavior and embraced pure suburban warfare. Tesla appearances became erratic and psychotic. 5 a.m. one day, midnight the next, 3 p.m. random strikes designed to create constant anxiety about when my access might be strangled. Her unpredictability was more torturous than routine harassment. At least scheduled terrorism allowed planning around insanity. Now every trip outside carried the possibility of finding my driveway blocked by Karen's mobile prison, her face visible through the windshield like a demented jack-in-the-box waiting to spring. She hired private investigators, filed additional complaints, and began spreading rumors about my criminal associates and suspicious nighttime activities. The woman's desperation reeked like burning garbage mixed with the autumn air, and everyone could smell the violence coming. Thursday evening, 3 weeks into Karen's legal warfare, I sat in my workshop surrounded by the familiar symphony of autumn, chainsaw echoes from distant logging operations mixing with the metallic smell of old tools and decades-old motor oil soaked into wooden workbenches. Sorting through Grandpa's papers for ammunition Sarah Palmer might use in our federal case. Boxes of documents I'd avoided for years because grief makes you postpone confronting the past. That's when my fingers found it, buried beneath tax records yellowed like aged whiskey. A single document that would transform Karen's harassment campaign into the legal equivalent of bringing a knife to a nuclear war. The 1987 Millbrook Heights Development Agreement. Signed between my grandfather Earl Mills and Cascade Properties, the original developer who turned half our family land into Karen's suburban paradise. The paper felt fragile as butterfly wings between my trembling fingers, but the words hit like sledgehammer blows to my nervous system. When Cascade bought 2/3 of Grandpa's property, they hadn't just purchased land, they'd negotiated protections that made my current property rights absolutely fucking bulletproof. Grantor hereby retains perpetual agricultural access rights across all developed properties for accessing remaining family holdings via existing farm roads and pathways. Said access rights include operation of agricultural vehicles, construction equipment, and commercial vehicles necessary for agricultural, forestry, and construction operations on retained family property. The taste of victory flooded my mouth like copper pennies mixed with morning coffee as I read the next paragraph, hardly believing the legal weapon my grandfather had forged 37 years ago. These access rights shall be binding upon all subsequent property owners, homeowner associations, and municipal authorities. No restrictions, covenants, or regulations may impede exercise of these easement rights without written consent of Mills family or designated representatives. The document was notarized, county filed, and stamped with official seals that made it as legally unbreakable as bedrock. Grandpa hadn't just sold land, he'd created a legal nuclear warhead that had been waiting 4 decades for someone stupid enough to threaten his grandson's constitutional rights. Karen had been terrorizing me on my own property, while I possessed the legal right to drive logging trucks through her entire subdivision anytime business required it. Not just my driveway. Through her neighborhood, past her McMansion, across her precious manicured streets whenever agricultural or construction operations demanded access to my property. The easement was broader than Karen's worst nightmare. Commercial vehicles necessary for forestry operations meant logging trucks. Massive, diesel-burning, road-shaking logging trucks carrying 40-ton loads of Douglas fir could legally traverse every street in Millbrook Heights subdivision without HOA approval, municipal permits, or Karen's precious permission. My hands shook as the full scope crystallized. While Karen played her Tesla blocking games, I'd possessed federal easement rights that predated her subdivision, her HOA, and her entire California-funded fantasy of suburban control. Every morning she'd blocked my gate constituted federal civil rights violations against constitutionally protected property access. The workshop air suddenly reeked of sawdust mixed with pure vindication, as I realized Karen hadn't been fighting some isolated construction worker. She'd declared war on someone with federally protected rights and the legal ammunition to destroy her completely. My call to Sarah Palmer was brief but volcanic. Sarah, I found something that changes everything. A 1987 easement agreement giving me agricultural access rights through Karen's entire subdivision. Every Tesla placement has been a federal civil rights violation for 3 weeks straight. Sarah's laughter crackled through the phone like electricity arcing between power lines. Jesus Christ, Garrett. If that document's legitimate, Karen hasn't just been harassing you, she's been systematically violating federal property law while creating evidence of her own crimes. This could destroy her business, bankrupt her personally, and potentially trigger criminal charges. But sitting in that workshop, surrounded by tools that built honest lives and documents that protected them, I made a strategic decision that would prove devastating to Karen's future. Instead of immediately playing this nuclear card, I'd let her continue the harassment while building a comprehensive federal case. Every morning she blocked my gate now meant another felony count. Every false legal filing, every harassment session, every Tesla placement was additional evidence of systematic civil rights violations against federally protected easement access. Karen thought she was systematically destroying some small-town rube. She was actually creating the legal foundation for her own annihilation, one documented violation at a time. And tomorrow I would begin planning exactly how those logging trucks would exercise my grandfather's gift, legally, publicly, and permanently. The easement wasn't just my ace in the hole. It was a royal flush that would crush Karen's operation so thoroughly, she'd never threaten another working family again. Friday morning brought the scent of rain-soaked Douglas fir mixing with diesel exhaust and the metallic taste of strategic revenge as I called an emergency meeting at Big Jim's hardware store. The back room reeked of WD-40, decades of honest sweat, and anticipation thick enough to cut with a chainsaw as my war council assembled around scarred wooden tables that had witnessed 40 years of small-town problem-solving. Sarah Palmer clutched legal documents like ammunition. Marcus the surveyor spread property maps with surgical precision. Joe Briggs cracked his knuckles with the satisfaction of someone about to educate entitled outsiders in rural reality. Deputy Rodriguez, off-duty in civilian clothes, represented unofficial law enforcement blessing. 6 local contractors who'd watched Karen terrorize our community sat ready to coordinate the most beautiful legal demolition in Oregon history. Gentlemen, "And lady," I began, spreading the 1987 easement agreement across Big Jim's battle-scarred table. "Karen Whitmore picked a fight with the wrong goddamn family. My grandfather left us a gift that's about to solve our HOA problem permanently and publicly." Sarah's voice hummed with professional bloodlust as she explained constitutional law to men who built things with their hands. This easement survived federal housing legislation, property transfers, and municipal authority challenges. Garrett possesses irrevocable right to exercise agricultural and forestry access through that entire subdivision. No HOA covenant, no city ordinance, no Karen Whitmore can legally interfere. Joe Briggs leaned forward, county inspector badge lending governmental authority to our civilian uprising. "Perfect timing. County's scheduled road maintenance survey for next month. Need to test emergency access routes, verify weight capacity, document turning radius clearance, all official county business requiring heavy equipment access verification." The plan crystallized like morning frost on windshields, beautiful in its legal simplicity and devastating potential impact. 3 logging trucks, fully loaded with Douglas fir straight from Cascade timber. Kenworth T800s with 550 horsepower Cummins engines pulling 40-ton loads. 120 tons total of perfectly legal commerce exercising federally protected easement rights through Karen's manicured suburban paradise at precisely 6 a.m. Marcus traced red ink across detailed survey maps, marking our route of maximum legal devastation. Convoy enters subdivision via Maple Street, proceeds directly past Karen's McMansion, continues through Oak Drive, loops back via Pine Street for legitimate equipment access to Garrett's property. Completely legal, fully documented, constitutionally protected commercial activity. Years ago, my logging buddy Jake taught me that successful heavy equipment operations depend on understanding load distribution, road surface limitations, and timing coordination. Knowledge that would prove crucial for executing our legal precision strike without property damage or safety violations. The beauty was surgical. No laws broken, no property damaged, no harassment charges possible. Just 3 diesel-powered lessons in constitutional law delivering education at 40 tons per truck with the subtle grace of controlled avalanche. Deputy Rodriguez nodded approvingly, his presence lending unofficial blessing to our constitutional rights exercise. Long as everything's legal and properly documented, law enforcement supports legitimate commercial activity. Of course, if certain individuals attempt interfering with lawful interstate commerce exercising federal easement rights, his meaningful shrug spoke volumes about Karen's legal exposure. Sarah coordinated legal framework with excitement that made courthouse fluorescent lights seem dim by comparison. Federal injunction preventing interference with easement access, county permits for agricultural equipment transportation, State Department of Transportation, commercial vehicle documentation, DOT safety compliance verification, insurance certificates for all 3 trucks and drivers, every legal requirement satisfied with redundant documentation. "This isn't revenge," Sarah emphasized, papers rustling like autumn leaves as she organized bulletproof legal protection. "This establishes precedent for rural property rights across Oregon. Families facing HOA harassment will have constitutional template for fighting back legally and permanently." Big Jim contributed local intelligence with decades of small-town wisdom. Karen's routine is predictable as sunrise. Tesla positioned by 5:45, iPhone and latte ready by 6 sharp. She'll be sitting there filming when 120 tons of reality comes rumbling past her kitchen window at legal highway speeds. The technical coordination required military precision. 3 professional drivers briefed on route, timing, legal authority, and emergency procedures. GPS tracking for real-time documentation. Professional camera crews positioned at strategic intersections. Social media coordination for live coverage of federal easement rights being exercised after 37 years of dormancy. Community mobilization expanded beyond our core team. Word spread through underground networks of working families who'd watched Karen's tyranny with growing anger. Volunteers coordinated witness positioning, backup documentation, and post-operation media management. Joe Briggs provided official county cover with bureaucratic genius. Emergency services planning requires periodic heavy equipment access testing. Completely routine county maintenance survey, fully authorized, absolutely necessary for public safety compliance. The psychological operation was equally crucial. Continue letting Karen believe she was systematically destroying me, while final preparations proceeded in absolute secrecy. My live streams would maintain frustrated defensive persona while logging trucks were coordinated, permits secured, and constitutional justice prepared for delivery. Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. sharp. Karen's Tesla versus 120 tons of Douglas fir backed by federal law, county authority, and constitutional property rights that predated her subdivision by 4 decades. We scheduled the constitutional education session for exactly 1 week. 7 days to coordinate logistics, secure governmental approval, and position witnesses for the most spectacular legal demonstration of property rights in Oregon history. Week 6 brought Karen's metamorphosis from suburban dictator into full-blown domestic terrorist, and the morning air reeked of expensive perfume mixed with the acrid stench of desperation as federal charges closed around her like a steel trap. Monday morning greeted me with 2 men in discount suits sitting in an unmarked Crown Victoria, telephoto lenses aimed at my workshop like I was running some kind of meth lab instead of legitimate construction business. Karen had hired Sentinel Security Solutions, cut-rate Portland outfit specializing in discreet surveillance services for paranoid suburbanites with more money than functioning brain cells. These wannabe spies worked 12-hour shifts documenting my every breath, photographing visitors, timing bathroom breaks, measuring the distance I walked to my mailbox. Their presence transformed our quiet neighborhood into East Berlin circa 1975, complete with hostile surveillance and the constant sensation of unfriendly eyes cataloging your existence for future persecution. The guards positioned themselves with military precision at 6 a.m. sharp, just as my Tesla-blocked morning routine began. They'd film Karen's harassment theater while simultaneously documenting my suspicious responses to having my constitutional rights violated daily. The woman had created her own surveillance state with herself as both dictator and star performer, but Karen's hired muscle made one critical error that would detonate her entire operation. Wednesday morning, Jake Morrison stopped by to discuss a foundation job and immediately recognized one of the guards. Bobby Hutchins, fired from Jake's crew last year for showing up drunk and stealing copper wire from job sites. "That asshole's not licensed for shit," Jake muttered, pointing at Bobby through my kitchen window. Sentinel Security got their state license revoked 6 months ago for conducting illegal surveillance operations. These idiots are basically expensive stalkers with cameras. Here's something most people don't know about private security. Oregon requires specific licensing for surveillance activities, with criminal penalties for operating without authorization. Companies that lose their licenses can't legally conduct any investigative services, making their clients accessories to criminal surveillance conspiracy. Joe Briggs arrived that afternoon for a routine property inspection, but spent most of his time documenting Karen's illegal surveillance operation with the thoroughness of someone building a federal case. Within hours, he'd filed complaints with Oregon's Security and Investigations Licensing Board about unlicensed surveillance activities targeting private citizens. The company withdrew their services Thursday morning faster than rats fleeing a sinking ship, leaving Karen liable for conspiracy to conduct unlicensed surveillance, adding another felony charge to her growing collection of legal catastrophes. While Karen's spy network collapsed, my logging truck coordination reached final preparation stages in absolute secrecy. 3 Cascade timber drivers briefed on constitutional law and optimal route timing, federal permits secured through Sarah's legal channels, county authorization obtained through Joe's official capacity, GPS tracking systems installed for bulletproof legal documentation. Karen, completely oblivious to approaching constitutional education, escalated her street-level terrorism with the creativity of someone who'd lost all connection to consensus reality. Her Tesla positioning became a full-time obsession. Morning placement at 45-degree angle to force impossible navigation, afternoon repositioning to block mail delivery, evening adjustment to prevent garbage truck access. The woman had transformed automotive harassment into high art, each Tesla position calculated with mathematical precision to cause maximum psychological damage while staying technically within legal boundaries. The metallic scraping of my truck paint against her bumper became our neighborhood's daily soundtrack, punctuated by her victorious laughter echoing from kitchen windows. But obsessive repositioning generated unintended collateral damage. The mail carrier filed official complaints about blocked access. Waste management documented repeated delivery obstruction. Fire department expressed concerns about emergency vehicle access. Karen's harassment campaign was creating municipal liability issues that threatened everyone's property insurance. Her Facebook propaganda reached North Korean levels of manufactured outrage with hourly updates about escalating security threats and dangerous criminal elements. Photos of my legitimate work equipment labeled as industrial weapons. Time-stamped documentation of normal construction activity presented as evidence of terrorist preparations. The community backlash exploded as Karen appointed herself chief of suburban Homeland Security, complete with unauthorized citizen interrogations and surveillance that would make Stasi officers jealous. She began confronting visitors to my property, demanding identification like some self-appointed border guard protecting her personal kingdom. When Marcus arrived for legitimate surveying work, Karen followed him around my driveway with iPhone cameras, broadcasting live commentary about documenting suspicious foreign individuals conducting illegal reconnaissance activities. "This is neighborhood defense," she announced to her phone, stalking Marcus like a demented nature documentary filmmaker. "I'm protecting our community from dangerous outside agitators." Even her most devoted HOA supporters began evacuating her sinking credibility ship as Karen's behavior crossed from annoying to genuinely disturbing. Facebook comments shifted from supportive to concerned to openly hostile as neighbors realized they'd been supporting someone with serious psychological problems. Meanwhile, Tuesday morning approached with the inexorable certainty of sunrise, and 120 tons of constitutional education prepared for delivery directly past Karen's kitchen window. Route confirmed, drivers ready, legal documentation, bulletproof, media positioned for coverage of the most spectacular property rights demonstration in Oregon history. Karen had no idea her reign of suburban terror was about to meet logging truck reality traveling at legal highway speeds. Week 7 brought Karen's final descent into complete madness as Tuesday's logging truck convoy approached like an unstoppable force of constitutional justice, and the morning air tasted like diesel exhaust, mixed with the metallic flavor of impending legal devastation. Monday morning arrived with Karen's most desperate gambit yet. Emergency federal restraining order filed with the U.S. District Court in Portland, complete with perjured testimony claiming I'd made credible threats of violence using heavy machinery and was planning coordinated attacks on residential property using commercial vehicles. 8 pages of pure fiction describing me as some kind of domestic terrorist planning to ram logging trucks through her subdivision while she cowered in fear. According to Karen's sworn statement, I'd allegedly threatened to flatten her house with bulldozers, made menacing gestures while operating dangerous equipment, and was coordinating with extremist groups to conduct vehicular attacks on law-abiding residents. The woman had crossed from ordinary lying into the realm of federal perjury so brazen it belonged in a textbook about criminal stupidity. But Karen's legal Hail Mary was about to meet the legal equivalent of a brick wall moving at highway speed. Tuesday morning, Sarah Palmer called with news that made my coffee taste like Victory champagne. "Garrett, you're not going to believe this. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed Karen's emergency petition and issued a temporary injunction against Karen. She's now legally prohibited from interfering with your federally protected easement rights. Her own restraining order request became a court order protecting your constitutional property access." The irony was so perfect it hurt to laugh. Karen's desperate attempt to stop my logging truck convoy had resulted in federal court protection for exactly what she was trying to prevent. Her lies had backfired with the spectacular precision of someone shooting themselves in the foot with a howitzer. But legal humiliation only intensified Karen's street-level terrorism campaign. She recruited 12 concerned neighbors to create human blockades at the subdivision entrance, planning overnight occupation to physically prevent any commercial vehicles from entering Millbrook Heights. Tents appeared, folding chairs materialized, and Karen's disciples prepared for siege warfare against constitutional property rights. The sight of grown adults camping in suburban streets to prevent legitimate commerce was both pathetic and dangerous. These people had been so thoroughly manipulated by Karen's propaganda that they were willing to commit federal crimes to support her delusions of authority. Sarah's counter-legal strike was swift and devastating. Karen's human blockade constitutes conspiracy to violate federal civil rights under color of false authority. Every person participating faces potential federal charges for interfering with constitutionally protected property access. I'm filing emergency motions for criminal prosecution of the entire group. The taste of approaching victory mixed with morning coffee as I watched Karen's supporters realize they'd been recruited for federal crimes. Most evacuated their camping positions faster than tourists fleeing a hurricane warning, leaving Karen with maybe 3 die-hard supporters willing to face felony charges for her cause. Meanwhile, Karen launched her final propaganda blitz with the desperation of someone whose entire world was collapsing in real time. She created fake social media accounts to post negative reviews of local businesses supporting me, doctored photographs claiming property damage from my equipment, and contacted my construction clients with fabricated safety warnings designed to destroy my livelihood. Her Facebook campaign reached fever pitch with claims that I was coordinating with militia groups, planning armed resistance against legitimate authority, and threatening peaceful residents with industrial terrorism. The woman had transformed from HOA president into full-blown conspiracy theorist, inventing elaborate fiction about my motivations and capabilities. But Karen's smear campaign was generating unexpected backlash as people recognized the desperation behind her increasingly unhinged accusations. Local newspapers began investigating her background, uncovering her pattern of harassment in previous communities. TV stations prepared coverage of the HOA harassment case that's divided rural Oregon. And the community response was overwhelming support for constitutional property rights versus manufactured HOA tyranny. Anonymous donations appeared at my property with notes like, "Constitutional rights matter," and "Teach Karen some respect for working families." By Monday evening, Karen's human blockade had been declared illegal obstruction of public roadways by the Sheriff's Department. Deputy Rodriguez issued ultimatum: disperse by 6 a.m. Tuesday or face mass arrests for interfering with legitimate commerce and violating federal court orders. The morning air grew thick with anticipation and the distant rumble of diesel engines as Tuesday approached. The day Karen's 3-week reign of suburban terror would meet 120 tons of logging truck reality exercising federally protected easement rights that predated her subdivision by 4 decades. Karen made one final desperate phone call to the governor's office, claiming industrial terrorists were planning to destroy peaceful residential communities with coordinated vehicular attacks. The governor's office referred her to ongoing federal legal proceedings and suggested she consult mental health professionals about her escalating paranoia. Her Tesla sat in the driveway like a white metal monument to entitlement about to be educated in small-town constitutional law, while 3 logging trucks prepared to deliver lessons in property rights that would echo through Oregon legal precedent for decades. The sound of air brakes and constitutional justice was less than 12 hours away. Tuesday morning, October 15th, 5:30 a.m. sharp. The air smelled like diesel fuel mixed with Douglas fir, and the metallic taste of justice served ice cold after weeks of patient preparation. 3 Kenworth T800 logging trucks assembled at the county maintenance facility like mechanical titans preparing for legal warfare. Each truck carried 40 tons of prime Oregon timber, 550 horsepower Cummins engines rumbling with the deep bass note of unstoppable constitutional authority. I rode shotgun in the lead truck with driver Tommy Rodriguez, Deputy Rodriguez's younger brother, 20-year logging veteran who understood that some lessons required heavy machinery to deliver properly. The convoy moved through morning fog like a vision of working-class justice, headlights cutting through pre-dawn darkness as we approached Millbrook Heights subdivision. TV news crews positioned at strategic intersections, cameras ready to document the most spectacular property rights demonstration in Oregon history. "There's your neighborhood, Garrett," Tommy grinned, shifting gears as we approached the subdivision entrance. "Time to exercise some constitutional rights that have been sleeping too long." Behind us, trucks 2 and 3 followed in perfect formation. Drivers briefed on federal law, route timing, and the historical significance of what we were about to accomplish. Not revenge, not harassment, just cold constitutional education delivered at 40 tons per lesson. Karen's human blockade had dissolved overnight like sugar in rain. Only 3 diehard supporters remained by sunrise, quickly evacuating when Deputy Rodriguez appeared with arrest warrants for anyone interfering with legitimate interstate commerce operating under federal court protection. 5:58 a.m. Lead truck entered Millbrook Heights subdivision. The sound was magnificent, diesel engines echoing off suburban houses like thunder announcing the arrival of constitutional law in Karen's carefully manicured kingdom. Windows lit up as residents woke to rumbling engines exercising property rights that predated their entire neighborhood. Karen's Tesla sat positioned across my driveway with mathematical precision, her silhouette visible through the kitchen window, iPhone ready to document what she assumed would be another morning of successful harassment theater. She had no idea she was about to star in the most educational moment of her privileged life. 6 a.m. The convoy approached Karen's house. Tommy laid on the air horn, a blast that shattered suburban silence like Gabriel's trumpet announcing Judgment Day. Karen appeared at her window, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips, as 40 tons of Douglas fir rumbled past her McMansion at legal highway speeds. Her face transformed through expressions of confusion, recognition, and pure terror as she realized what was happening. The second truck followed 30 seconds later, air horn blasting, timber cargo swaying slightly as it navigated the turn past her precious manicured lawn. "Oh my God!" Karen's voice cracked as she ran outside in bathrobe and slippers, iPhone filming frantically. "This is illegal! You can't bring those trucks through here! This is private property!" Tommy Rodriguez smiled and keyed his CB radio. "Ma'am, we're exercising federally protected easement rights established in 1987 and confirmed by U.S. District Court yesterday. You're welcome to read the legal documentation, but please stay clear of moving vehicles." The third truck approached as Karen positioned herself directly in the roadway, arms spread wide like she could physically stop 40 tons of legal commerce through sheer entitlement. Tommy applied brakes, air systems hissing, but Karen refused to move. "I'm calling the police. This is terrorism, industrial terrorism." That's when physics delivered the lesson Karen had been requesting for 3 weeks. The sudden braking caused the massive Douglas fire logs to shift forward on their restraining chains. The load shifted. Chains groaned under 40 tons of timber pressure, and Karen's eyes widened as she realized she was standing directly beside a logging truck carrying enough wood to crush her Tesla into a compact disc. "Ma'am, please step away from the vehicle," Tommy called through his window. "Commercial loads can be unpredictable when obstructed." But Karen, drunk on 3 weeks of harassment success, planted herself more firmly in the roadway. "I'm not moving. This is my neighborhood. You have no right." The chain snapped. 40 tons of prime Oregon Douglas fir cascaded off the trailer like a timber avalanche, logs rolling and bouncing with the sound of controlled destruction. Karen dove backwards, screaming, as massive timber pieces crashed down exactly where her Tesla had been parked for 3 weeks of harassment theater. The sound was indescribable. 20 logs, each weighing 2 tons, crushing Karen's $90,000 Model S into a white metal pancake approximately 18 inches thick. Glass exploded, metal shrieked, and Karen's symbol of suburban superiority became an expensive monument to the consequences of obstructing interstate commerce. 63 residents witnessed the destruction from their windows. 17 filmed the entire incident. 3 TV news crews captured every angle as Karen's harassment vehicle became scrap metal in approximately 4.2 seconds. Karen sat in the street, bathrobe muddy, staring at what remained of her Tesla with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been flattened by constitutional law and logging truck physics. "The chain must have been overloaded," Tommy observed to the gathering crowd and news cameras. "Commercial timber transport involves calculated risks. When individuals interfere with legitimate commerce, accidents become more likely. That's why federal law protects these easement rights. Public safety requires unobstructed commercial vehicle access." Deputy Rodriguez arrived as Karen attempted to file charges against the truck drivers, only to be informed that she was the one facing federal violations for obstructing interstate commerce under federal court protection. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for violating federal injunction, obstruction of legitimate commerce, and interfering with constitutionally protected property rights," Rodriguez announced, handcuffs appearing like magic as Karen's harassment campaign reached its natural conclusion. I approached the news cameras as Karen was loaded into the patrol car, her Tesla's remains being pushed aside by county equipment to clear the roadway for continued legal commerce. "This was never about revenge," I told Channel 8 News, choosing my words carefully for the mic drop moment that would define this entire conflict. "This was about education." Karen spent 3 weeks teaching me about harassment, intimidation, and abuse of authority. Today, she learned about constitutional law, property rights, and what "deal with it, peasant" sounds like when delivered by logging truck. Some people require heavy machinery to understand simple concepts like respecting your neighbors. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause as 3 weeks of suburban terrorism ended with Karen in handcuffs and her Tesla transformed into expensive recycling material. Constitutional justice had been served at exactly 40 tons per lesson. 6 months later, Millbrook Heights had transformed from a battlefield into something resembling an actual community, and the morning air smelled like coffee and possibility instead of conflict and Karen's expensive perfume. Karen Whitmore spent that Tuesday in county jail, bailed out by her Portland lawyers for the low price of $50,000 cash bond. By Christmas, legal fees had consumed her savings. Tesla insurance refused coverage for driver negligence resulting in obstruction of commercial vehicles. And her real estate license had been permanently revoked by the Oregon Real Estate Agency for systematic harassment of rural property owners and fraudulent representation practices. The federal case settled out of court for $185,000 in damages, money Karen paid by selling her McMansion at a loss and filing for personal bankruptcy. She moved back to California, where property records show her working retail jobs and living in a studio apartment. Last anyone heard, she was stocking shelves at Target and avoiding social media entirely. Justice served with compound interest and no possibility of parole. The Tesla remains became local legend, displayed at Big Jim's hardware store as a monument to what happens when entitlement meets constitutional law at 40 tons per lesson. Tourists drive from 3 counties to see Karen's car and hear the story of suburban tyranny defeated by logging truck physics and federal easement rights. But the real victory was community transformation. The Millbrook Property Rights Festival became an annual tradition, drawing 500-plus attendees to my property for barbecue, live music, and educational booths teaching easement law, surveyor basics, and HOA limitation strategies. Local businesses thrive from increased traffic, and the festival has become a regional attraction for rural property rights education. I established the Sarah Mills Memorial Legal Defense Fund in honor of my late wife, providing free legal assistance to rural families facing HOA harassment. First year raised $125,000 through crowdfunding, corporate donations, and merchandise sales. The fund has helped 37 families fight back against suburban tyranny, with a 100% success rate in cases involving proper documentation and constitutional property rights. The legal precedent established by our case has protected rural properties across Oregon and 3 neighboring states. Mills versus Whitmore is now cited in property rights legislation, and Sarah Palmer has argued similar cases from Washington to Texas, using our documentation as template for defeating HOA overreach. Deputy Rodriguez got promoted to sheriff, partly based on his handling of our situation. Sometimes the law requires patience, he told the local newspaper, but when constitutional rights are violated systematically, law enforcement has an obligation to protect citizens from suburban tyrants pretending to have authority they never possessed. Joe Briggs became county development director, implementing new policies requiring HOA disclosure of existing easements before property sales. His reforms have prevented dozens of similar conflicts by ensuring buyers understand property rights limitations before signing contracts. The logging truck drivers became local heroes, invited to speak at rural property rights conferences across the Pacific Northwest. Tommy Rodriguez started his own hauling company, specializing in constitutional commerce delivery services with the slogan, "Heavy loads, constitutional rights, and suburban education available upon request." My construction business expanded dramatically through referrals from supporters who appreciated someone willing to stand up for working families. The excavator stays busy with projects from families who want contractors unafraid of entitled neighbors and HOA intimidation. Most importantly, Millbrook Heights became a real neighborhood instead of Karen's personal kingdom. Residents organize block parties, support local businesses, and resolve disputes through conversation rather than harassment campaigns. Property values actually increased after Karen's departure, proving that community cooperation builds wealth better than suburban authoritarianism. The annual festival includes workshops teaching practical skills, surveying property lines, researching easement rights, understanding HOA legal limitations, documenting harassment evidence, and contacting appropriate legal resources. Hundreds of families have learned to protect themselves from predatory neighbors using education rather than intimidation. Local community college offers continuing education courses based on our case, teaching property law basics to rural residents who never expected to need legal knowledge for suburban survival. The courses are always oversubscribed, proving demand for constitutional education among working families. 3 years later, I still drive past the spot where Karen's Tesla became expensive recycling material, and I still smile at the memory of constitutional law delivered by logging truck convoy. Sometimes justice requires patience, documentation, and the willingness to let bullies provide evidence of their own crimes. But sometimes it just requires 40 tons of Douglas fir and the constitutional right to drive them past an entitled neighbor's kitchen window at 6 a.m. sharp.
You know, Mom could have easily let that first $75 fry slide. Wrong shades of black mailbox. Rats half an inch too long. Most of us could have just paid it and moved on. Keep the peace, right? But there's something about being targeted when you're already down. When you have just buried a wife and you are trying to find some quiet corner in the world to hell in. And Karen, she saw that and decided to press harder. The thing about people like Karen Whitmore is they scout on you staying quiet and isolated. They bank on the idea that you won't compare notes with your neighbors, that you won't dig into the financial records, that you should observe the punishment and stay quiet. But Mayo had 30 years in telecommunications. He understood systems, documentations, how things connect to other things. And when Karen actually called 911 because of a Wi-Fi name, she handled him exactly what he needed. I get messages from people all over the country dealing with their own Karen situations. Different neighbors, same playbook, targeting, selective enforcement, financial games, as more people feel completely powerless against this. Have you dealt with something like this in the HOAs? Someone who seemed untouchable until they wasn't. I'd be curious to hear about it in the comments. If this story intrigued you, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to see more of this, because trust me, there are plenty more where this came from. Sometimes the best revenge is just patience and a really good filing system.